Filing in. Welcome to Civic Hall. My name is Peter. My job is to kind of connect the dots amongst our community as we all look to advance the use of technology for the public good. Civic Hall is a pretty simple and meaningful vision, right? We bring together diverse people, issue areas, disciplines, organizations to give them a safe and trusted place to have very difficult conversations. We have workshops and hackathons, professional development opportunities, we incubate companies. But really it's a place for you to learn from other people, to get the support you may need both professionally and emotionally, because we live in a pretty amazing time. And so we're so happy to have you here. This is a very safe space, and we may have some conversations that are difficult but have to happen. And so I will turn it over now to Lauren, who is an organizer with BetaNYC, to tell you more about the evening. But welcome to Civic Hall.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for the Moz Fest and CfASummit recap. Before I get started, I'd really like to thank our generous event partners, so Mozilla, Microsoft, and Civic Hall. And as you know, this is the last event that will be held in the main stage at 156 Fifth Avenue. And Beta has had a lot of really great times here, from hosting hack nights and small beta talks in the co-working space, to taking over this whole entire second floor for our annual School of Data celebration. We thank Civic Hall for their hospitality over these last 2 years, and we look forward to partnering with them in the future. Thank you so much. So those of you who are familiar with BetaNYC know that we like to host a recap event every year after the CfASummit. And this year, we decided to expand that to include our friends in the open web community who attended MozFest. However, given recent events, we felt it was important to expand this event to address the uncertainty that lies ahead. So tonight, I hope that the knowledge gained and the lessons learned through projects that were showcased and discussions that were had in breakout sessions will inform the path forward. As a community, it's important now, more than ever, that we remain vigilant. I would like to also thank the Internet Society, who's providing a live stream to tonight's event. And that is my name. We didn't do a great job of this, but on a table when you hopefully came in, but you probably saw the alcohol first, we had thanks and pledge cards that look like this on the screen. If you get a chance and you see one of these around, we would love it if you filled it out. We would love you to state what you're thankful for today and the commitment that you will make next year to make the world that we live in a better place. And on the flip side, you can put your name, email address, and Twitter handle. And we also have a little consent box. And if you check it, we may share it on social media stream. So first, I would like to give you an overview of the CfASummit, Code for America's annual conference. And this conference is held in Oakland, California, during the first week of November, typically. And it's a diverse group of public and private sector employees from a range of departments and specialities getting together with CFA staff, fellows, and brigades over the course of 2 days. And it's split usually between like main stage presentations and then breakout sessions. And then the day before, there's a pre-summit where there's like very half-day workshops on different things. And all of these presentations and the work that's presented at the conference embodies the principles of CFA, that for a government to truly serve the people in the 21st century, it must be good at digital, ensure policy and implementation work together and are centered around the needs of people, and be a platform for civic engagement and participation. And Code for America advocates the use of smart and socially responsible best practices to build technology with and for governments using the practices that you see on the screen above, all of which you can find more information on CFA's website, which is very informative, and I encourage you to check it out. So these practices are applied to the products that are created by the in-house staff at San Francisco, the National Fellowship Program, and the local brigades of volunteers. This was a great year for New York City because New York City was one of the cities that was chosen to have for the fellowship program. The fellowship program runs for 9 months and it assigns 3 fellows in 2 cities around the country to build products for governments that need help. This here you can see is a presentation or a picture of the New York Fellowship's presentation, where, if you give me a chance, a moment, our New York City Fellowship team of Amelia, Charlie, and Keith worked with the Mayor's Office of Operation and 11 agencies to create Work Connect, a system to improve information sharing between vital social service providers. And on top of that, they were great supporters of BetaNYC and helped tremendously with last year's School of Data. Seeing Amelia present with Alicia Matthews, who's on the Enterprise Data Solutions team, was a really big highlight. I was screaming and a little tearful. I'm super, super proud of them. So in 2012, Code for America started the Brigade program, and it's a program that encourages local volunteers to collaborate with government and community partners to build tools that address local civic issues. Now there are over 80 brigades in cities and regions around the country and Canada, and a number of growing groups in Europe, Asia, South America, and Australia. The day before the conference, the brigade organizers met to celebrate achievements and also to share challenges. Some of the great achievements is that many of the brigades, which were really once under the wing of Code for America, are becoming a lot more independent. Many of them are becoming 501c3s. Many of them are finding fiscal sponsors and getting outside funding. A lot of, in the larger cities like New York City and Chicago, and some are at an advantage because they have, a larger member base. But there are some really amazing things that are happening in the smaller states, the Midwestern states, and it was really great to learn about those. However, we face challenges ahead. It's scary becoming a little more independent, and funding is always a challenge. Maintaining a member base and making sure that you engage them throughout is challenging when you're volunteers that have, many of us, full-time jobs. So we got to commiserate and celebrate all of this the day before the summit began. So now that I've given you an overview of Code for America's conference, I would like to pass the baton to Caitlin Thaney, who oversees programs at the Mozilla Foundation. But before I do, I would like to point out this gentleman in the corner here. This is Johnny Goldstein, and Johnny Goldstein will be recording some of the major themes that are presented in the talks that you'll see soon. He calls them, and I already forgot, what was the best way to call it? Visual listening, correct? Yes. So I am really excited to see what he's doing. Feel free to take pictures and record. And I'm going to pass the baton now to Caitlin. Thank you.
All right. Now, also, there's my name. So first off, huge thanks to Peter and Civic Hall, and also Noelle and Lauren from BetaNYC for inviting Mozilla to be a part of this here. So I oversee programs at the Mozilla Foundation. Raise your hands if you heard of Mozilla Foundation before. Okay, phew. Raise your hands if it's only because you know of Firefox. It's okay, it's okay. So giving you a bit of context as to what this beautiful group of people, and there's a lot more that are in the wings that didn't make it down into the ground floor for our annual event. and also how this pulls together with some of the themes that you're going to hear about tonight, not only from the talks from our annual event, which we refer to as MozFest as short. No, it's not about Morrissey, but short for the Mozilla Festival, and also where that ties into some of the things you'll hear as well from Code for America and what brings us all together. So the Mozilla Foundation, kind of separate from the work on Firefox, has for the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years been building programs beyond just software development. So one way we reach communities is through products like Firefox and the browser, and through open source. That's really deeply rooted in our traditions, but also more in the narrative of making the web a global and public resource for all. Now, in the past year, we've gotten a bit clearer about what that means and what sort of stance we want to take, especially with some of the more timely and urgent challenges that we're faced on, even pre-election. Things like privacy and security, digital equity and learning, things like decentralization and open innovation, and also digital literacy, which has a number of different sort of, I guess, ways in which it manifests across the network of people that we engage with on a day-to-day basis. And so the Mozilla Festival started actually back in Barcelona when the foundation was really trying to figure out what it could do outside of, really holding the trademark for the Mozilla and Firefox word marks, which up until 6 years ago, it was really just pushing papers. And so over that past time, we've built out programs in learning and in science around open data and around digital literacy for youth as well as for adults. We've built out an advocacy engine, so things like the net neutrality campaign and the digital encryption work that you saw Mozilla take a stance on. That's all housed within the foundation, as well as things around not only badges and other sorts of tools that can help researchers, developers, librarians, activists, and others take action and help protect the open web. And so now let's fast forward to this recent event. So this was, I believe, our 6th MozFest. Aurelia, is that 6th? Our 6th MozFest, and every year we go to London in usually the end of October, beginning in November. It's a busy time of year for these sorts of events. And this festival is like nothing else. So I started my career in open science, working for an organization some of you may know called Creative Commons. I thought I had open organizations down pat when I joined Mozilla. I will tell you, I got that challenged pretty quickly. This is like the best manifestation, someone had said, of what the web is. You can kind of navigate through the stuff that you don't necessarily want to dig into, but that you're interested in. There's beautiful art that's being created in the main free spaces, incredible conversations. People are running sessions that are really hands-on, less slide decks that you'll see kind of in the stand-up. And we've got some speakers tonight that will be telling you a little bit more about some of the interesting things that they've started to build. And we also had about 2,000 people coming together, not only around those broader issues that really are some of the biggest threats and challenges we're going to be facing when it comes to internet health and how that manifests into civic engagement across those different subject areas, but also looking at things when it comes to not only copyright reform, journalism and media innovation, and what that means in the times we're in now, especially when it comes to privacy and security in the past few weeks. Open science and things for youth, and so having a really active youth zone, as well as not only libraries, learning, open leadership, and a number of other really key issues. And so I would encourage you all to kind of look through some of the things. It's mozillafestival.org. We also have, we're going to be around, and my colleague Aurelia will be talking a little bit about some of the things that she was working on. And we're here to answer any questions. But in terms of what you can imagine for the next year or two of Mozilla, what does it look like when we start taking all of these different groups that are united around not only a belief of the web as an open resource for all, and also access to information, but also taking action in classrooms, in institutions of all different sorts, through software, through trainings, et cetera. What does it look for them to start taking a stance and helping to shift public opinion to make sure that we're still protecting our freedom online? So with that, I won't take up more time. I will hand it over to my colleague, Aurelia Moser, from the science team at Mozilla, who will tell you a little bit more about some of the sessions she's been running.
All right.
Great to be here. So that's my name. And these are my slides. And I have to confess, I thought this was going to be a bit of a smaller operation. So I'm very impressed that you all turned out and that there's recordings and drawings. And hopefully you'll feel this is worth it. So I'm going to be talking about Bianonymous, which was part of a series of sessions we had on the science floor at Mozilla. And part of a larger art project that kind of relates to your bio information and then also to the protection of your privacy. And so these are all humans at Mozilla Festival from 2 years ago, I think, or maybe it was last year. All people who have mass and take up space, much like yourselves. And they all have personal information and biological information that identifies them quite specifically. I would encourage you too, if you have a mobile device or something, to go to the short link here, Bionom. I'm not going to be talking about noms or like eating, but it was a shortened way of referencing the slide deck because there's a bunch of links in all the notes that link to all the images on the projects that I'm going to talk about, and I'm going to kind of zip through them. So you already heard an intro to the Mozilla Festival. This is the space from last year, actually. It's more of the like plenary space where people come down and hear just general talks, but each floor that you see kind of articulated on the side has a theme or sometimes multiple themes. And the science floor, for the past 2 years at least, has been on the top floor. And most of the sessions are related to the open web and the open internet, but also how it relates to academia and science and research. So that's a little bit of what I'm going to talk about. And this kind of frames the festival, but also sort of frames our work in the science lab. So that's our logo, and there's our science fox. It's really hard to see him, but he has a little test tube, and he's like the Firefox, but for science. And I have stickers of him if you're interested and you want to come up and get them later. But anyway, the open web is fueled by reproducible, accessible, and collaborative technology, and also research. And it's built by our community. So that was kind of the theme that frames the science floor, and this is Abby, who's one of our developers, kind of holding up our little science flag. So it's very strongly wedded to the origins of the internet, right, as a place to share academic papers, right? This was a place for sharing research, and science should be heavily involved in how that stays open and how we evolve that model. So what does open on the web look like for Mozilla? Here are a few planning examples for the Mozilla Festival. So all of the Mozilla sessions are on GitHub. You apply to give a session, and then it routes directly to GitHub, and it's subcategorized and labeled, and everyone can see the evolving conversation around your session and whether it's accepted or not. So that's part of the openness. We also made a lot of effort to engage people kind of physically in the space this year. So this is the demo of the badge that you get on the left side. And you have all these stickers where you can apply for what languages you speak, who you can communicate with. There was also a big push this year to translate all the sessions, and so we had a lot of volunteers who were live translating, which if you've ever tried to translate while someone's talking, it's really intimidating. It's really hard, especially if it's a technical topic. So it was really impressive that everybody mobilized behind this issue. And then in the lower, kind of covered up by the label, there's a bunch of logos. So we had an open design project that started, our marketing team started a couple months ago to redesign the branding of Mozilla. And every week they would write a blog post with a bunch of designs for the logo and also for t-shirts and swag and that kind of thing around a theme. And then they would explain it briefly in a paragraph, and anyone from the community could anonymously contribute their thoughts on whether they thought it was good or not. And some people were super generous and were like, oh, wow, I can see someone spent a lot of design time on this, and good for you for open sourcing it. And some people were like, this reminds me of the Eye of Sauron. I hate it. What are you even doing? You're ruining my ideals for this community. Me, the anonymous person who is entitled to make judgments. And then the design team would respond like, thank you for your feedback. I was like, oh, I love our community. They're so nice. But then there's also the Open Innovation Toolkit, which is kind of tiny logo on the right side, and that's another host of resources that Mozilla provides for developing and innovating on ideas and concepts. So these are just a few things from the past year and from the Mozilla Festival that define how we see open on the web. And this is kind of open in the physical world. These are a few examples that inspired our Bianonymous session, which kind of is a portmanteau of bio and anonymous, in case you didn't get that. But there's a bunch of art projects that we've been working on for like, the past 2 years that give people guides to how to spoof their DNA in the public setting, how to replace it and kind of mask it, and then also a whole body of research on the BioAnonymous.me website that allows you to understand a little bit more about the state-level legal parameters, at least domestically or in the states, for who can retain your biodata, how long they can keep it, what they can keep it for, when they can collect it. And you don't have to just be a felon or somebody where they seem justified in collecting those data. They can actually collect it on almost anyone. So anyway, this is part of what inspired the session. And this was the session titled Navigating Privacy and Sharing in Biomedical Research, and it was co-hosted with Jason Bobe, who's one of our fellows at the Science Lab. We also have a fellows program, just like the CFA folks, but we support 4 fellows for 10 months in open research, and specifically in the hard sciences. So a lot of them are postdoctoral fellows or academicians who are working on things in open science and trying to change their communities and their institutions' perspective on openness in the sciences. So Jason is at Mount Sinai, which is actually in New York, and so he assisted with the session, and we kind of made it a fireside chat where we had this little TV screen fire, and people came and gathered around and talked about these issues and what made them uncomfortable about their biodata, about sharing it, about opening their genome. These are all things that have become quite topical now that people are actually quite intimidated by. And so why? So why are they intimidated? So I don't know if I can play this video, but I'm gonna try and see is there any sound? No? Oh. It's not gonna work. I don't know if I can I? Can I just unplug something? No. Anyway, this is a video that was shared. It kind of went viral a little bit a few days ago. It's from a company, Momodo, I think is their name, but they're kind of like a 23andMe. You spit in a tube and send it away, and then they tell you what your DNA is. I didn't mean to rhyme that, but it just felt like it was flowing, so I was going to go. They interviewed a bunch of people who felt very patriotic or nationalistic about their backgrounds, and hopefully this will work.
Well, I am 100% Islamic, yeah, definitely.
This is a Kurdish wedding with my mom in its traditional Kurdish clothes.
We're just proud black, so that's it.
Yeah, I think we are probably the best country in the world, if I'm honest.
Think about other countries and other nationalities in the world. Are there any that you don't feel you get on with well, or you won't like particularly?
Germany. Yeah, I'm not a fan of the Germans.
You might think they're a little bit.
Particularly India and Pakistan, probably, because of the whole, the conflict.
Because I have this side of me that's like, that hates Turkish people. Not people, but the government. But French.
No.
We're just the best, it's just fact.
I'm more important than you. I don't know you, but in my opinion, I am strong and I am more important than a lot of people.
How would you feel about taking a journey based on your DNA?
Yeah, I feel very intrigued.
What could you possibly tell me that I don't know?
So do you know how DNA works? So you get half from mum and half from dad, so 50% from each of them, and they get 50% from their parents, and back and back and back. And all those little bits of your ancestor, they filter down to make you, you. I need you to spit in this tube for me. And spit up to the little black line.
That's a lot of spit.
The story of you is in that tube. What's it going to tell me?
It's going to be, oh yeah, you're French, and wait, your grandparents are French, and wait.
100% Bengali. Solid Iraqi. I'm Cuban. You're going to tell me that in English? No, I told you.
Jay, come down and join us?
I'm a little bit nervous, I have to say.
So you're ready to find out your results?
You read it up to us, please.
Look at me.
Oh my god. Oh, wow. Shit. I didn't expect that.
All of them.
Whoa! No. No.
Caucasus, which was Turkish.
Yeah.
Eastern Europe, Spain, Portugal, Italy, Greece.
I'm 32% British.
What?
Great Britain, 30%. 5% German.
I'm Irish.
Yeah.
So I'm a Muslim Jew. Great Britain, 11%.
You saw these results on Eastern Europe. Iceland is definitely moved closer to Europe. Man.
I'm going to go a bit far right now, but this should be compulsory. There would be no such thing as like extremism in the world if people knew their heritage like that. Like, who would be stupid enough to think of such thing as like a pure race?
In a way, we're all kind of cousins, in a broad sense. In a much more direct sense, you have a cousin in this room. Turn around and guess who it is. What?
What's that?
Why don't you come down here and meet your cousin?
I did no idea. Like, my heart's pounding right now, I swear to God. I'm straight from everywhere, but to this.
I'm a real man of the world.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you.
So would you like?
Oh yeah.
So that was shared and is relevant, not just because 23andMe and these services provide a way for you to connect with other people, but because your personal health data is increasingly accessible to you in ways that it wasn't before. So what does that do? Who cares about PhDs? Certainly not academics. In this case, personal health data, not PhDs. You can laugh, it's okay. So who cares about them? Well, your government cares about it, your personal health data, your susceptibility to certain things. Some governments profile you according to your bioinformation and ask you to go through a medical exam before you can immigrate. Companies care about it. Companies are selling it to you. Researchers care about it, of course, and just about everyone. Black Mirror writers care about it. Lots of people care about it. And when interviewed, this is like an excerpt from, or a few graphs and figures from a personal health data research study that was conducted this year about how important is it for people to keep their data anonymous? And people said it was extremely important in a majority of the cases. But would they be willing to share their personal health data with researchers? And when you frame it that way, they feel like they're contributing to the greater good, so they're also very interested in doing that. So how do we reconcile this tension with wanting to keep your information private, right? But also wanting to share it with the world so people can learn from it. So here are a few examples. This was the tweet where I got that video, actually, in the center. This is just an article from the Wall Street Journal that came up a few days ago about how cell phone smudges last for up to 3 days with your bioinformation on your phone, and that people can swab and then get information from. There's a bunch of open projects on GitHub related to biodata and to open sourcing your genome. I think we've all probably heard of a few stories of people putting all their genome information on a GitHub repo and allowing anyone to download it, which is bold, and a lot of people are doing it, and some people are networking around it. And then this is 23andMe gives you a bunch of visualizations, right, of your information if you send them your spit. So a few years ago, I did an experiment with a few friends where I spit in a tube and my friend spit in a tube, and then we both spit in the same tube, and we sent it off to see if they would give us generic DNA results, for everything. And we did get slightly distinctive profiles, but nobody detected that it was a mixed spit pattern. It was strange, though, that you can get so much information about your ancestry from your spit, which we think is so inconsequential. Like, you put spit on everything. You put it on your glasses. You put it on whatever. So yeah, it's impressive. So what are some of the consequences? And this is a lot of what we talked about in the session. What are people afraid of? If you sign up for the Harvard PGP study, which is not pretty good privacy, it's Personal Genome Project, you have to sign a consent form. And one of the things that they warn you about in the consent form is, what if we find out that your father is not your father? Are you okay with that? Are you okay with that in this process? And you have to agree to be okay with that. So questionable pedigree and parentage, you might find out more than you want to about things. Discrimination in insurance, right? People are worried about that. They're worried about their insurance companies charging them more because they release their bioinformation for everyone. And now people know that they might be vulnerable to this type of cancer, which raises their rates. There are lots of physical vulnerabilities with relating your biology to your identity in ways that are less than just visible, right? So if you use even biometric data, it's not like a number you can change or a serial number that you get assigned that you can reapply for a new one. You can't get a new fingerprint. You have it. It's Gattaca. It's wedded to your identity. Corporate collusion, there's a lot of companies that provide biodata services like 23andMe, but they may or may not be affiliated with Google, and they may or may not mesh your data with other things that you might not want to be meshed. And then also clones. Clones are scary, maybe. They also warn you about that in the PGP study, about the potential for someone to take your data and make a clone out of you. Cool perks, plausible deniability. If your DNA is planted on a crime scene, if you open sourced it first, you can deny that you're responsible for that, right? So open source your stuff now, because otherwise you might get framed later. You can contribute to controls and to research, which is awesome. A lot of people, and this is something that Jason brings up all the time in his talks, a lot of people don't participate in biomedical research studies until they're sick. But we need control data from everyone, right? So you should be contributing all the time. And now with Apple Health Kit and a lot of Research Kit app, it's very easy to download an app and contribute to a research study every day. We create a more honest and accepting culture, which is great. And also kind of clones are cool, right? Orphan Black, right? Who isn't into occasional clone something? Maybe not. All right. So how can you get involved? I would join openhumans.org. It's kind of a framework that connects a bunch of different biodata services and allows you to choose what types of data you want to share with researchers or with companies. It lets you kind of own what you open source and also connect with other people who are open sourcing the same things. Check out GenSpace. It's a local biolab. There's a bunch of artists, and there's kind of a collective of people who are doing pretty cool things with bio and also teaching a lot of sessions, and I'll show one in the next slide, and how you can culture your own bacteria and that kind of thing. Participate in biomedical research. There's a lot of Apple Health Kit projects. If you have an iPhone, a lot of them leverage the sensors in your phone to help you contribute to Parkinson's research studies to see how dexterous you are or how quickly you can complete an activity, and that helps them build their database of information for research. Share your genome letter. There's a project called Sharing Your Genome Letters. I can't read your text, but I'm guessing it means that I'm over time. Sorry. And then Blog for Biononymous, which is the website that I showed you before that has all this bioinformation research and also legal research about what are the constraints on your bioinformation. And this is a project at MozFest where people found their DNA matches, so adenine, guanine, cytosine, thymine, but you'd get a random set of numbers or letters, and you'd need to match with your counterpart and then take a photo, and you got entered in a raffle. So these two ladies were matches. This is the GenSpace event that's in the coming weeks that I would encourage you to check out. And then this is the Biononymous website. It's just a GIF. But there's lots of cool guides and videos that people have made about how to protect your bioinformation. So we made one called DNA Spoofing, and that's what this still is from. Sorry I went over time. Thank you for listening.
Hey, what's up? So this is a bigger room than I expected. Hi there. I'm Nate Hill. I run an organization called the Metropolitan New York Library Council. It's a membership organization of 250 libraries, archives, and museums around this city. And we do a couple of different things. Actually, we do a bunch of different things. Professional development work and software development work, probably split sort of evenly down the middle. And I'm super excited because we're also moving to a new studio right now. You could guess the address of that studio. It's 599 11th Avenue. And so we're currently a homeless organization, which is a little tough, but it's also, it's a great time of change for us. So thank you to the Mozilla Foundation folks, because the reason that I'm here and the reason that I got to go to the Moz Fest, which was killer, is a grant that we've been participating in that's going on all across this country, piloting web literacy expertise for public librarians. So I don't know how many of you have seen this work that Mozilla has produced, but it's pretty fantastic stuff. This framework of read and write and participate as being the way that we can become literate on the web. And there's all this fantastic curriculum that goes along with all of this. And so what we have done here in New York is pulled together folks from the New York Public Library, the Brooklyn Public Library, the Queens Library, and the Westchester Library System, and gone through all of these, super fun kinds of tutorials with them, and just gotten them all excited about this stuff. And so we went to MozFest, and we decided we were going to remix some of these ideas, and we did a pretty fun presentation there. My colleagues, Davis Aaron Anderson and Matthew Koppel, came along, and we took sort of trusted primary source web content. So we got a bunch of images and things from the Digital Public Library of America, because we were in Europe, the similar kind of effort called Europeana there. And we pulled all of this stuff together and used Mozilla's Thimble tool to work with people to remix all of this stuff that looked like it was super legit and okay to tell stories that were totally not legit and okay. Which is an interesting thing considering how much people care about facts and truth lately. So it was a particularly fun time. It's funny to think about what it would have been like if MozFest had happened after the election. I was just talking with somebody about that. So hey, like any of these presentations, about 3 hours before the presentation, I'm sitting there with the other two people that we're gonna do it with, and it's crunch time, and we're working on getting everything together, and we're all excited about Mozilla and the open web and the general feeling that everyone's here for openness and learning together, and then something sort of like this shows up on my computer, and I'm like, dang, what's up, right? Better do this really fast. And so there was this kind of aha moment that I had. And so I kind of want to just throw this idea at all of you guys, and you can either throw Rotten Tomatoes at me and kick me out of the place, or you can say, maybe this is something that we should think about doing. So, there are a lot of different kind of efforts within library land getting people different kinds of privacy training. There's a great project out of Data and Society that we've collaborated on some called the Data Privacy Project. The Library Freedom Project is another one. And these are these wonderful efforts to kind of teach people what all of the tools are that are out there. But I got to thinking, as I'm sitting there at the MozFest, where you're essentially surrounded by people who are as web literate as can be in many instances, that whoever really learned anything by patching stuff and by playing it safe, right? That is not the way that I've actually learned stuff in my life. Usually I screw around with something, I break it, I get in trouble for that, then I try again and I fix it. And so I was thinking about whether or not maybe there are some other ways that we should think about teaching people how all of this stuff works. So maybe the answer is not just to create this sort of baseline bit of knowledge that everybody's going to have about how to stay safe when you're browsing the internet, but maybe we need to take and pull together a troupe, in my case, of librarians and give them the ability to really bust stuff and cause some trouble. Because once you do that, then you really understand the things. So I'm imagining, what if we had classes in which it's here's how to strip DRM from something, right? Or what if we set up some kind of network and we teach people, here's how you do your own man-in-the-middle attack. These are bad things. But if you do these bad things, then potentially you have a much better understanding of how everything works. So I guess I just want to end this with, hey, if you're into that, drop me a line. We could do some courses. This is the space that we're building out right now. Will be open by late January. It is going to be a killer studio space. And come and hang out. Thanks. Sorry, I was supposed to introduce you guys. Jeannie and Sabert.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Crowley from the Ethical Culture Fields in School.
Hi, I'm Saber. I teach at the Browning School, Computer Science. And to echo what Nate said, if I could do Groundhog's Day, I would love to kind of freeze my life in at Mozilla Fest forever and not do the next couple of weeks. But here we are. We want to talk about ethical computer science, and I'm going to lay a little background, and then Jeannie will take over. So when I immigrated to this country in the 90s, I got to go to a good high school, I got to go to college, I went to a liberal arts school, but even a quote-unquote liberal arts school, my identity and ethics was never really represented in any of the courses I took, especially none of the science courses. So there was nothing about who I was or why we were doing the science and what the impact of it was. And in the world of computer science, it's not much better yet. It's slightly better because there's a need to improve the pipeline problem, that there's not enough diversity come to the pipeline. So there's a consideration of identity and there's a consideration of sort of ethics at the periphery. So we'll have a discussion at the end of a unit about how this might impact that. But to really build a computer science curriculum that really welcomes people in and gives them a place, you really need to put identity and ethics right at the sort of ground floor.
So this came out of looking at our computer science curriculum, and it was just very standard. And occasionally they'd be like, oh, you know, we might want to think about X, Y, and Z, but that's homework or afterwards. And it also came out of our school. We had a very low enrollment in computer science, and it was very homogenous. And we were like, why aren't more people taking these classes? Because they had been positioned as classes for people who are only interested in computer science, with no real awareness that computer science impacts all of us. Like, our data is collected, we're surveilled, AI decisions are made about us. You know, law and legal policy are decided by people who don't really understand computer science. So part of our goal was like, how do we reframe a computer science curriculum to be both inviting to people who might not think it's something for them, and then to also bring more people in who are not just computer scientists. So we had a couple, you want to talk about the courses? Yeah, so we have a couple courses we took to MozFest.
So we try to think of like, how could you do a quote-unquote liberal arts computer science? What would you need to do to create that? And something that would suggest to both the students and the teachers that what they weren't doing was just consuming a bunch of technical skills and regurgitating them, but putting the context first. So one is kind of thinking of CS literature, looking at stories of sort of the tech living out in the real world. There's a lot of narratives about the growth of the tech industry after World War II, and a lot of personalities in play and sort of who they are and how that plays out. Walter Isaacson does a good job of it in Innovators, and there's a lot of things to argue about in there. Kim, I'm going to get her name wrong, Kim Zetter, Countdown to 0 Days, kind of a more updated, modern day one where both politics and the law sort of come together to make a technical moment happen, and both books are really engaging and a good way to both bring the technology and the moral and ethical considerations. This would be a good way to kind of throw it out to non-majors, if that's what you're looking for, and say, hey, we're going to use the books, but we're also going to learn the tech and try to find our way through there. And you can't do one without the other. I think that's sort of the other challenge is there's a lot of moralizing that teachers like to do. As a teacher, I can acknowledge that. And there's a lot of sort of hiding behind the technical stuff that a lot of other technical teachers want to do. And this sort of says that we're not going to do that.
So a couple couple other courses that, so we came up with eventually 9 kind of framework courses, and we took them to MozFest. And one of them was an Amazon Echo teardown, which is literally like walking kids through the experience of thinking about how the data travels, where it goes, where it's stored, what are the supply chains, what are the privacy issues, how does, a lot of kids don't understand that computer science actually involves hardware, because they're so used to just the software side. We looked at a course called Margin of Error, which is like machine learning and pattern recognition, and what happens when you take that and you actually put it in a drone. So we want these things to be constantly married to one another. So our session was essentially a gallery walk. We took the 9 courses, put them up, and we said, looking at this, what are some questions that are missing? What are some questions that students should be able to ask after they leave the course? What are perspectives that we're missing? And what are resources that can help deepen our thinking? So the big takeaways that I got from MozFest, and this is the second time attending, one is the format. So it's not a conference. They use the festival word very purposefully. So you don't go to present, and you don't go to teach. You go with this thing that you're working on, and you're like, I have something awesome, and I really want more people to work on it. So 1,800 to 2,000 people at these, educators, computer scientists, activists, librarians, scientists getting together and giving you a very different way of looking at your work. So I think that's really important to know that the person who really gets the most out of MozFest is the person who is presenting. So that's a really cool thing we got out of it, and it really pushed our thinking. Another big thing is global context. Like, I live in New York City. It's awesome. I don't leave too often because there's a lot of things here. But when you go to London, and particularly, I've gone to conferences in London before, and it's a lot of people from that area. I met people from Tanzania. I met people from Kenya. I met people from all over who had very different ways of looking at what I was doing. And a really big thing, they said, I like what you're doing. It doesn't work for me. We have a state or national curriculum, and you kind of have this free-form, independent school thinking. So how can you take what you're thinking about and make it into something that more people can use? So our kind of ideas morphed over the course of that experience to say, all right, we're not building a curriculum, we're almost building like an open source set of ethical questions that people can plug in when they want. And that's really important because the questions I come up as like a US citizen are totally different than the questions other people are going to come up with, and that's huge for where we came next. The other big thing is perspectives beyond the US. So, when we're talking about, I, as an American citizen, have a right not to be surveilled, and it's like, we're not really talking about all those other people that are involved. So I think it's really healthy to have a global perspective on these issues, and these are some of the questions that the participants came up with. It's okay to spy on us, but not our enemies. Is spying in any form dangerous? Thinking about encryption. In the US, we usually treat encryption, and we're privileged. Encryption for us is like this neat thing that like a subset of us do, but most of us are not in mortal danger for not using encryption. So thinking about encryption is something as like a global good. Like, stop being so lazy about encryption and inoculate all of us, because there's actually people who are dying because of this. So I think this is a really important thing to say, like, stop thinking about your own perspective and understand the internet doesn't live in New York, and the internet doesn't live in the US. It's much bigger than that, and I think that's something, I got that before I went, but I think it's important to incorporate that into your curriculum. And the really big thing that we got when we left, the fourth thing, is an ongoing collaboration. So you don't go to MozFest and you're like, hey, here's my idea, this was so awesome, thanks guys, I'll see you later. We're actually developing an ongoing community to continually update these ideas to keep building, because it's just so rapidly changing, this idea of creating a static curriculum that you print in a booklet and you give to DOE teachers and you're like, that's it. It's not sustainable. And so it's really lovely after going, I can't even, people are like, oh, let's go do this in Norway. And I'm like, I hadn't even thought about that. That's awesome. So I think one really neat thing that comes out of this is how many people are thinking about this, but MozFest is a way to bring all those people together around that idea. So that is it. I'm going to bring Casey.
Hello and good evening. I know I'm battling. I'm sure everyone's finished with their first drink, and I just want to thank you for still being here. So I'm Casey Lynn Kocher, and I'm with Civic Hall Labs. We are the sister organization of Civic Hall, where you are right now, and we build technology for the public good and help others do it too. So I've actually been working in GovTech, digital organizing, telecommunications for nearly a decade, and this was my first CfASummit, first of many to come, I'm sure. For me, the summit really made stark that the civic tech community has a heart and soul, but we have huge problems that we need to address. And so, from the main stage to the cocktail high tops, the words that I kept hearing at the summit were words that the words were inclusion and diversity. And that was dropped in nearly every conversation, every speech. And so, we actually need to come to terms with what that means. And so we need to really think about what does diversity and inclusion actually mean in terms of the organizations that we bolster, the tools that we wield, the way we collaborate, and the way we even CfASummit. So diversity and inclusion are commonly just kind of thrown around as these standards that are this nebulous concept that we are all created equal. But we really need to build that out. And so I wanted to explore two trends that I saw just because really I did hear the words inclusion and diversity everywhere, and I didn't see them thoroughly explored often, but when I did, it was pretty remarkable. So I wanted to explore one way that I thought really gave depth to the words and to the word inclusion, and another way that didn't, but it highlights a lot of opportunity. So, what do I mean by inclusion and diversity? Let's get on the same page here. What I mean by that is it's inclusion and diversity is not about gender or race parity. It's not about quotas. It's about leveraging our differences so that way we're better able to achieve better results as a team, better results, better teams, better opportunities, better experiences. And so where might these differences lie in terms of diversity and inclusion? And they can be understood in terms of identity. And so we have primary and secondary dimensions of identity. And there's a variety of ways that people identify. And so understanding this is really a capstone. That's really the core of understanding what inclusion and diversity is. So a diverse organization, diverse convenings, diverse teams are ones where people have the ability to bring these forward as assets because these are assets. A diverse organization, convenings, teams, right? We understand that these experiences and skill, we understand not just that these are assets, but we're actively looking to see what is missing, whose voices aren't here, whose experiences aren't here, and we're worse because they're not here. And so it's an active question on participation. And so just as user-centered design is an approach that we can apply to building tools, building programs, inclusion is an approach. So it's an approach that you apply to your tools, your technologies, your organizations, your operations, your workflows, your communications. And so that's how I understand inclusion. That's how I frame it. And so I wanted to talk about two different trends that I saw, one that was very exciting and one that is an opportunity that we can move forward in. So at the CfASummit, I saw actually Microsoft, which I'm happy they're here. I was really impressed by Microsoft's accessibility program. It's an example of building for everyone. And so Microsoft is and you can go to microsoft.com/enable. They didn't pay me to say this. I just was really impressed by the work that they're doing. And so Microsoft is testing products with individuals across the spectrum of physical needs in order to meet users where they're at. And so they are making products that are built to be usable for all in that way. And it's more than just, the message that I took from them was more than just about product testing. And so one of the programs that I was really interested in was how they brought 24 individuals with autism across their organization, and they didn't just recruit them and bring them in, but they continuously sought out resources and support pinpoints that would help them as employees in their organization. And so one of those examples were external coaches that would help them outside of when they were actually working. And guess what? Everyone wants an external coach. I want an external coach. And so it's something that their employees were asking for around, as well. And so I would watch out for what Microsoft is doing in this field. They recognize the points of exclusion and are becoming more robust in their approach of learning from diversity, which is really inspiring, I think. So I wanted to talk about something else, the contrast of that, a trend that deeply concerns, here you go, deeply concerns me. So a number of talks were about the virtues of diversity, solely in terms of the tech talent pipeline, identifying unconscious biases in resumes, interview questions, looking at recruitment networks. The CFA fellows are an incredibly diverse group, and that's through inclusive hiring strategies. However, a lot of the discussions was limited into diversity and inclusion only being within the terms of recruitment. And that is a huge problem when we are relying solely on HR to solve our diversity problem. Diversity should not just rest on their shoulders, it rests on all of our shoulders. And so what I didn't hear, and what I think there's a huge opportunity for, is not just to look at who we're hiring and how we're hiring them and where we're hiring them from, but it's also to look at retention of our employees. It's a question of what does inclusion look like in our meetings, in our conferences, in our organizations, in our design. And so we have to intentionally, I would just want to point this out because we have, with these types of practices, intentionally, right, minimized unconscious biases so we can have a less biased process and get a more inclusive group of people to join our organizations. But they're joining organizations that are rife with unconscious biases. So how do we expect them to succeed? And that's something that I really think is an opportunity. So, in closing, I want to call on Civic Tech to come to terms with our shared values, to put muscle and bones on the spirit that we've collectively built. I want us to act, work, breathe, and live with inclusion. Thank you.
Next up, Andrew Nicklin.
Hey everybody, how's it going? So I'm Andrew Nicklin. I'm with the Center for Government Excellence, or GovX as I think we prefer to be called. And that's at Johns Hopkins University down in Baltimore, but I live here in New York City. So thanks, Noel, for inviting me to come and talk. So we help cities around the US work on using data and evidence to better inform decision making. And we work with mayors, we work with sort of senior government officials on that process. And so I think there was a natural fit for us to be at the summit and to have some conversations with the folks there. But I really appreciate Casey's words about the terms diversity and inclusion cropping up continuously during the summit, and I agree that was actually a very continuous theme. But as a data person, I actually had a very kind of different experience and a different perspective, and perhaps not as great a one. This is my fourth summit, so I've been to the first two and then to the most recent two, and I skipped one or two in the middle, I think. And I've had varying degrees of both being very incredibly well connected with the summit and also incredibly disconnected from the summit at the same time. And so last year was very connected, this year was a little less connected, my first year was very connected, my second year was not very connected. And I think part of the reason for that this year was because Code for America and their whole sort of organizational thing, the brigades and so on, have shifted very much to this idea of human-centered design and inclusion, and actually sort of taken away some of their focus on the data conversation, which I think is perfectly fair. I mean, they have to be very focused on their mission. So a lot of the sessions that I ended up going to, I sort of have to admit I was not strongly engaged with, but there were a few that I thought were particularly interesting. And one that I wanted to talk about was one that was centered around the White House Police Data Initiative. And so this is, if you don't know, this is an initiative that's been going on for a little bit more than a year. There are more than, I think, 120 or 150 police departments around the US involved in this at the moment. And the idea is that in order for them to become part of the initiative and get recognition, they have to release at least 3 data sets these police departments have to release 3 data sets about policing to their communities and create some engagement around those data sets. So actually, that's kind of an incredible movement, right? I mean, there's 120 police departments or more than that around the US that are already doing that. That's really impressive. So that session at PDI was very much, that session at the summit was very much centered on how does that work? How does conversations happen around this data? What kind of data is being released? And actually, there were quite a number of police departments there who were not represented as part of PDI. So that, to me, was a really clear signal that police and community policing is an increasing phenomenon around the U.S. And there are people very, very actively interested in continuing to move this forwards. And I think that's really important for what's going to be coming the next 4 years. And I'll get to that in a second. So I also want to mention that I had a chance to meet the folks from data.world, which was I keep track of all the open data tech platforms. That's one of my sort of professional areas of interest, and had a chance to talk with them a little bit about their work. And I think what they're doing is very, very interesting. So, and I think it's great that there's now another set of tools that has entered the open data community, is really available and easy for people to use, and does not actually require you to have a paid subscription in order to start putting data up there and do stuff. So I'm hoping that we'll see that platform grow, and I'm looking forward to them being a bigger part of the community. I also had the chance, actually probably the main reason why I was at the summit was to teach a workshop on open data. So although I said that the summit as overall did not have a focus on data, we actually did manage to have a workshop on the first day just before the summit. And we had about, I would say, 30 or 35 people who participated in that session. All of them, or nearly all of them, were first-time summit attendees, and nearly all of them were from county and local governments, with a few state governments in there. So I also took that as a really interesting signal, right? I mean, there's still a huge amount of interest in sort of in the U.S. landscape of governments wanting to do more with data and make it publicly accessible and create engagement and conversations around that. And in fact, in the workshop, one of the things that I did was sort of structured it in a very democratic way, so everybody got to kind of pick what was most important to them to talk through, and then we worked through, I think, the top 3 or 4 issues that they had selected, and community engagement was number 1 on the list, and the question was, how do I engage better with my community? How do I actually connect the data that I'm releasing to these conversations that I'm having about improving my city? So that, again, huge signal for me that cities are very interested in this, governments are very interested in this, and they want to be able to find the right people to have that conversation with. So that's part of my message to all of you is go seek those things out, go seek those people out, because they are out there, they are in government, and they do want to do great things, and they just need a little bit of help. We also talked in the workshop about program governance, because I think a lot of these folks don't actually know how to get an open data program started, how actually little it takes to sort of get over the hump of the first step, and how relatively easy it is to actually do something that is a enterprise-wide or a city-wide approach, doesn't take a lot of investment, and gets a huge amount of return out of that. So anyway, I was particularly thrilled with that conversation, just because as a data guy, it's very validating for me. So let's talk about the next 4 years. With the CfASummit being the week before the election, I think everything was very upbeat and very optimistic, and had it been maybe a couple of days later, the tone would have been very different at the summit. I think that because of the changes that we're seeing now, government needs more help than it ever has before. That's a message that I think a lot of people in the community are sending. And there is absolutely an opportunity for everybody here in this room, everybody outside of this room, to be a part of that conversation. And I would actually encourage people now to go work for a government. I mean, this is perhaps one of the most interesting times where you might say, well, I don't necessarily want to work for a government that doesn't support my ideologies. But actually, all the battlegrounds and all the places where your issues are going to be fought start behind government lines. And then they extend out into the community engagement conversations. So if you have the opportunity to sort of be behind those walls, then you have an opportunity to shape how that stuff is going to work. So I strongly encourage you to get involved. Privatization is going to increase. So as we talked about earlier, sort of the sensitivity of personal health information, personal health data. Well, if privatization is going to increase and there's not going to be a focus on regulation, that means that we're going to have some really interesting challenges in the US in the next couple of years, right? I mean, we're going to have this increase in investments in data in the private sector in service of government, but we're not going to have the government actually really trying to shape it and really trying to shape the things that are best for us as a country and for us as a community. So I do think that we need to work on that a little bit. And of course, folks here are probably aware that Sunlight Foundation is sort of very up in the air in terms of its future. And as one of the big transparency advocacy organizations in the country, with them sort of not being at the forefront of all this, that actually presents a real challenge for us, because who is taking on this baton? Who is going to carry this forwards, and who is going to be the representative of creating good democracy through transparency? Anyway, so that's it for me. I have a few other ideas of interesting things that I'd like to try out, but I'll save them for another time. So anyway, that's my CFA recap and my thoughts in general. Thank you. And I think Brianna is coming up next.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, my name is Brianna, and I'm currently a Civic Tech Fellow here at Microsoft New York. That's my name. I was lucky enough to attend the Code for America Summit this year. It was my first time, and I was there as both a sponsor and an attendee. You can see here, this is one of the Code for America logos superimposed with my face to show my very clear enthusiasm. But in all seriousness, the Code for America Summit was an awesome opportunity to kind of engage with a bunch of technologists, entrepreneurs, civic hackers, policymakers, and the like. So I kind of just wanted to give you a brief overview of some of the projects that were presented, as well as some of the main takeaways that I came from. So just kind of giving high-level overviews of some of the brigades and the work that they had done. There was a team in Seattle that worked with the local police force that actually developed an app revolving around mental illness and how to kind of go about best navigating mental illness citizens. So if there was someone who had kind of a pattern of crisis calls in the past and there was a police respondent that was on the scene, they could look up this citizen within an application, see past history, past crisis calls, and then there were actually resources for the respondent. So some of those might be their initial point of contact, some of those might be social service organizations that were suggested for that citizen. And the reason for that was because Seattle had a problem with either delegating citizens that had these kind of tendencies towards either hospitals or prisons, neither of which are conducive environments, right? I know we talked about the New York City Brigade a little bit, but just to kind of go over that, there was a Worker Connect portal that helped with a bunch of social service agencies. Down in Salt Lake City, there was a similar portal called ClientCom. And what they did was they helped with the criminal justice system, and they helped kind of improve the transparency and communication between some of the caseworkers there and citizens. And then lastly, there was a team in Kansas City that had vaccination immunization records. So for parents who couldn't keep track of where their child was in the immunization system going back to school, they could go in this portal and see exactly where they were. And then for nurses, they could see the time elapsed since a child had last gotten a vaccination. This was another super interesting talk between DJ Patil and Tim O'Reilly, revolving around data science and the emergence of data science. For those of you who don't know, DJ was one of the individuals who kind of came up with the term of data science, and the way that it happened is kind of funny because he got together with a bunch of other people and they were like, okay, well, this term, data science as a term didn't exist yet. And they were like, well, we're not really researchers and we're not really analysts, so let's just kind of come up with a breadth of job applications. We'll send it out on a bunch of networks and we'll see who applies, right? And they found that the people who had the skill set and the passion for data ended up applying to the data science application. So they literally just tested themselves into a job title, which I thought was really funny. That was an anecdote that I didn't know previously. So, but there were a couple of really important points that were made. One is that releasing data for the purpose of data itself is not particularly useful. So when you release a data set, it's very important to also give the public a hypothesis to work off of as far as direction. We also talked about the Popperian hypothesis, right? So making sure that everything is subject to falsifiability. Make sure that there is a data expert in the room when you're talking about data science, because they come with a background of knowledge where they might be more creative in the ways that they are using data. So they understand to a higher degree what data might be applicable and what combinations of data might be most effective to solve a given problem. And then the last one I thought was really interesting, and it was that the biggest advantage when you are in that data science position is cleverness. It's not necessarily intelligence. And they were talking about an anecdote with open data challenges. And the winning teams, it wasn't the algorithms that made them win these open data challenges. It was how clever they were with their data and what solutions they were able to come up with given these creative data sets that they had been able to create. Just as kind of an aside, as part of the Microsoft team, we had some demos that were really fun. It's part of our Microsoft Cognitive Services solution, which is a collective API that's categorized into 5 parts. We have vision API, speech, language, knowledge, and search APIs. They're publicly accessible online and they're free, so if there are technologists in the audience, and I'm sure there are, you can go check them out. And we had some demos that were up. The one on the left, your left, right? Yeah. The one on the left is one of our facial recognition APIs. So it was an age tracker as well as an emotion tracker API. So it's kind of fun because you would look in front of the camera and it would guess your age, which for some of us was fun and some of us not so fun. And it would guess your most likely emotion. And then on the right, there was also a different spin-off from one of the emotion APIs. And so you'd stand in front of the camera and there were 8 predefined emotions. So some of them were like sad, happy, surprised. And you would have to emulate all the emotions. And once you filled the card, then you won. But I think that the slide that resonated with me the most from the CFA Summit was this one. And I wanted to share it with you. I'm just going to read it aloud. Coders, you have the power to do tremendous good or tremendous harm. Please think carefully about the biases in your data and whether what you create will reinforce these biases. And this is not necessarily new information, right? We've known about algorithm bias for years. I've heard lots of speakers go over algorithm bias, but I think given recent events, it's especially important to reiterate. I saw it again. There was today, in fact, on Twitter, there was a Fairness and Transparency in Machine Learning conference, and one of the talks talked about a language translation service that took gender-neutral pronouns and then translated them into either male or female pronouns given on the context of the rest of the sentence, right? So in Turkish, for example, the letter O is the English equivalent for they. And so if you put in they are a computer programmer or they are a housemaker, it would translate it to he is a computer programmer or she is a housemaker. And so, again, it's just another example of why we need to be careful in our internal biases within these programs. And I think I agree with Andrew that one of the best ways to kind of go about being that change agent is to be behind the wall. And I think that it's especially important now more than ever to be critical and to be accountable for the products that we create. So, thank you. Next is Lou.
Hello, I'm Lou. That's my name. Like Andrew, I also don't have slides. And I don't know about all of you, but I was kind of in a depressive funk for about a week and a half. No reason, just... No, you can kind of extrapolate the reason. Anyway, so yeah, it was kind of bad because I had this really uplifting experience that is the Code for America Summit, and then a few days later, I'm like, well, I have a whole bunch of other things to think about right now. But yeah, so I'm going to talk about the summit a little bit. This was I think it was my 5th time attending the Code for America Summit. I've been attending since 2012. And the way I got to go there in 2012 was I was just accepted as a fellow in 2013. And I was already in San Francisco, so I'm like, let me see what these people are. Let me see what they're doing. Let me meet some folks. And it was awesome, and I'm like, I think I found my people. So I was a fellow in 2013. I did a lot of stuff as a fellow. I did some stuff for the city of Las Vegas. I did a side project with a bunch of other fellows called Street Mix. And that is an online tool where you can create your idea of what a street should look like in cross-section based on tools that I had to do manually when I was working as an urban designer. And we built an open source online version of that. And people are still using it today. And the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because when I attended the summit this year, we did a panel. It was on StreetMix. It wasn't even my idea. There was a bunch of researchers at Cal Poly, and they said, we like this tool. We're going to use it. We're going to fork it. And if you don't know what forking is, it's basically taking a copy of the code and then redeploying it yourself. They made a bunch of modifications. They knew someone who was a programmer. They hired him to do a bunch of changes, stuff that we wish we could have done during the fellowship, but ran out of time. And they deployed it in San Luis Obispo. They put it on the street. They got people to come by, play with the application, create their own versions of streets. They found that people just really like talking to each other. So even though it's an online tool, it was actually a really, really good thing for social engagement. And they took the results and they sent it over to an urban planner, and she put it into the reports. And this was the entire panel, was this entire life cycle of how this tool that we did in 2013 actually is affecting a city plan in 2016. And I was like, wow, that's really, really cool. I mean, this stuff, that we did in 2013 has a life of its own. And even just sort of when you're in the thick of it, you don't necessarily see what the effect of the thing that you're doing is. My colleague, Dave Guarino, had kind of said, kind of half jokingly, that I was the fellow who won the 2013 fellowship, which is kind of a silly way of thinking about the success of fellows. But he also was part of a team that stuck around after the fellowship was over. And they recently had a profile in the New York Times about something called Get Cal Fresh. If you haven't heard of that, it is a way to get people signed up for food stamps in the state of California. And it was a system that was not, as you've probably seen in a lot of government systems, not very easy to get through, and was a time-consuming process with a lot of paperwork and a lot of bureaucracy involved. And they spent the last 3 years just sort of staying at CFA to revamp that entire service to make it a lot easier. So I tweeted back at him recently, Dave, you are the 2013 fellow who won the 2013 fellowship in 2016. Congratulations. So that was that. The other thing that I did at the fellowship, not the fellowship, sorry, the summit when I was there, so we did that panel. It went really well, if I do say so myself. But the other thing I did at the summit was something, what I call the hallway track. And some people probably also call it the hallway track. But the idea is that, you go there, you see a ton of panels, and you see a ton of very inspirational speeches. And about 5 years into it, maybe they kind of blend into very, very similar trends. And so what you would rather do at that time is you talk to some of your friends and some of your peers who are doing really inspirational work throughout the summit. And so that was just an awesome time to spend there. I won't go through everything that I did. But what I'm really interested in is just that there's a lot of us who have been through the fellowship, who have been through Code for America in some capacity, that are working in all sorts of really interesting places now. There are people who are working in government. There are people who are working at 18F and USDS, and people who are doing innovation offices and civic tech offices in local governments all around the country, and even all around the world. And it just sort of reminds me of a conversation I had back in 2013, which is someone once asked me, is like something along the lines of, how do we make sure that the fellowship is as effective, the Code for America fellowship is as effective in 10 years from now? And I was thinking about this, and I was just like, man, this fellowship still exists in 10 years. We would have failed at our jobs. The idea is to transform government. If we were still doing the same thing, and we haven't gotten anywhere, what would the difference be? So the next year fellowship, I think, is actually going to be very, very different. I don't know all the details, but I'm actually glad to see that. They're learning from it. They're also seeing hey, there's a lot of change happening in the world. The fellowship in 2013 was kind of almost the few ways you had at your disposal to get involved in civic technology, but now we have agencies doing it. We have organizations doing it. We have the brigade network is stronger than ever. There's so many different ways of doing it and getting involved and working with local government, and it's really, really exciting to see that. So I don't know what the next 4 years is going to be like, but if you Google for Jennifer Palka's Medium post called "The Work Ahead Under Trump," something like that, and she basically said there's a lot of work to be done, and it's on us. So I'm hoping I continue to be a part of it. Hope I see you there too. That's it. Thank you.
Good evening. First, I guess I'd like to both thank and curse Noel for me being here with you this evening. Thanking, obviously, for giving me an opportunity to once again meet some amazing people, as I did at the Code for America, and curse him because I'm up here in front of you, and I was told I'm the only government official that's speaking to you. So let me give you my disclaimer, okay? Any opinions that I share with you this evening are my own and not reflective on any federal, state, or local, specifically the City of New York and the Department of Probation. Good. Now that that's out of the way. Yeah, when I was contacted by Code for America to actually speak at the conference on the main stage about the work that I had done with prosecutors while I was at the very institute where I was the founding director of the Prosecution and Racial Justice Program. And it was basically, I was developing a data-driven system to help prosecutors identify racial and ethnically biased decision-making in their offices and developing systems to ensure more fair decision-making. But as you've heard before, I got so much more out of being there than actually the few words that I got to say. As a matter of fact, I was sort of upset that I only got there just in time for my panel and then to see the end of it. And I was surrounded by some amazing individuals. So as a matter of fact, Christian, who you saw that amazing quote, I was part of that panel. And that really validates what I'm saying because you didn't see a quote from me, right? It was one of my fellow panelists. And so I left Oakland with this real optimism. I started thinking about ways that I could start connecting some of the individuals that I'd met with some of the prosecutors who I know are interested in using data, and they're basically struggling. And so I had this great optimism. But then the world as we know it changed. You know, the same way I would say our world changed on 9/11, it kind of changed again on 11/9. And in ways that we don't quite know what that's going to look like. I know that for those of us who've been involved in criminal justice reform, at one point we had some optimism, right? There was this window of optimism. And we started working, and that window became a door. And stepping through that door, we actually thought we could start building real bridges to reform. And now I'm concerned about that door slamming and that bridge now becoming a wall. And so there are great challenges and there are great opportunities for each of you. I just got back from Chicago where I was meeting with the Cook County State's Attorney-elect, an amazing woman, Kim Fox. And notwithstanding the fact that there are so many challenges in Cook County right now, I think they've got the right woman for the job. But one of the things that we were talking about was this question of data. And how can you use data not to ensure more efficient systems of prosecution, because quite frankly, as a former prosecutor, I can tell you, we've become pretty efficient on doing that without data. But how can you use data to really ensure more fair, more equitable, more just outcomes for the people the criminal justice system serve? But we also had a conversation, again, that's reflected in the quote that you saw, about how data can be used or misused or abused, right? So it's not just about fueling the winds of change, but it can also be used to fuel a gale force of fear and drive really good people out of their jobs. And so what I say to you is that just as you also heard this evening about coming into government, you're really needed. One of the reasons I became a prosecutor was because as a black man, seeing what the criminal justice system do to other people of color, I wanted to be the person sitting at that table, right? Because what do they say? If you're not sitting at the table, you're probably on the menu. And so I want to encourage each and every one of you. We need your talents. We need your help. And what I can say to you is that there are those of us in government who are ready, willing, and able to support you. So please come and join us, especially now more than ever. Thank you.
Those are all really hard acts to follow. Brothers and sisters and neighbors, I have to say thank you. We're running a little bit late, so I'm going to power through this as quickly as possible. Last year, we mourned the loss of a friend who really brought a lot of people together through many years and through many different types of events. I have to thank, first of all, Andrew and Mika for all of the amazing work that you've done through Personal Democracy Forum and building this space that brings us together. So thank you. When Andrew opened this space, and I know that there were several of you here, and there were so many collective thank yous, it was this past few years have been an amazing place to be here. We, as Lauren opened up, we did have hack nights here. We have done our School of Data. We've done weekend events, and they've been, Civic Hall has continued to be very generous with the opportunities for us to do crazy things here. I'm mourning the loss of this space personally, but I'm not mourning the networks that are going to come from this. And for those of you who don't know what this little statement from Cultivate the Caress is about, it's adapted from Kurt Vonnegut's Cats in the Cradle, but it's essentially about a spontaneous forming group joined by unpredictable links that actually get shit done. Whether you want to consider it God or Gaia, we are a network that does work for the greater good. My connection with MozFest is it's a weird space. This was from one of the parties that MozFest hosted, which was a celebration for the birthday of the internet, which is October 29th, mind you. And we were taken on a boat down the River Thames from the O2 to an old warehouse where we physically went through the internet. The top level of this particular party was the dark web. And one of the sayings throughout the evening was that everything that happens online happens in the real space. And boy, was it weird. And you shouldn't go to MozFest because it's weird, but you should go to MozFest because it is the Caress. It is the space where all of us who are really fucking passionate about the future are coming together to think about that infrastructure and to think about that networks, to think about the science, to think about where we're going forward. Another great conference is the Personal Democracy Forum, which is here in New York, hosted by the PDM team, which also runs Civic Hall, or Civic Hall now runs PDF. Anyway, it happens in the summer, and it's another great, wonderful collection of caressers. In regards to the beautiful caress that is happening across this nation, I got to stand up on stage and represent all of our brothers and sisters and those of us who are fighting to do the work that we do here in New York City. There are now 80 brigades across the US. We've now elected a leadership team that is going to spirit forward a way that the brigades have a collective ownership of civic technology. Civic technology itself is a value that has multiple sub-libraries that have yet to be defined. And our biggest challenge that we face over the next 4 years is being explicit of what those values are, and then how do we hold ourselves accountable to that future. And I think we're all collectively lucky that we have an amazing space of Civic Hall that's going to carry forward as a co-working space. We have the library, we have Gen Space, we have all of these networks, network adjacent, that are really thinking about the openness, the honesty, protection, and our future.
So here in New York, I got to play around, or really just get up on stage and talk about our Civic Innovation Fellows, which is something that we're doing with Gail Brewer. So I should comment and say that everything that I'm saying up here is representative of myself, not necessarily BetaNYC, maybe a little bit, and then, but definitely not of the Manhattan Borough President. But with Gail's office, we're able to think about how community boards can affect change. Community boards, how many of you know your own community board? Raise your hand if you live in New York City. Okay, not that many of you. If you're looking to affect change in your neighborhoods around zoning, about permitting, about quality of life issues, you have to look up and start attending community board meetings. That's separate from city council, and that's separate from all of the other government ecosystem that's around. And where your talents can be utilized, because I swear, and I echo everybody else's statement here, that we need to be more civically involved, and we need to be understanding the whole mechanism of government and be engaged within it. So community boards need your technical talents too. We have curriculum that we've been able to revamp this year. I have to give a huge shout out to Emily Goldman, who was here earlier, for helping revamp our curriculum. So if you go to our YouTube page, you'll find about 6 hours worth of content on how to use the city's open data, how to use BizWeb, how to use Acress to actually answer the questions from the data that the city's producing. So I want to give a huge shout out to you. Thank you, Emily. I couldn't have done it without you. So, to be succinct, what happens next? Let us mourn. We can mourn. That's a personal. My mom's a social worker. We can mourn, but once we're done mourning, or once we feel that we can move beyond that, we should resist. I mean, this is our opportunity to claim our democracy at a local level. If we really can't affect all of the change that we want at a federal level, we can do that here locally. As neighbors, we can say, no, we're not going to deport our neighbors. We can say, no, we're not going to give our information up. We can still have a single-payer healthcare system if we get an appropriate governor and a state legislator to accept that as a system that we're willing to pay into. We can do these things here within New York City and within New York State. And the only way that we can do that is if we're organized. So the next 4 years is going to require a lot of hand-holding and a lot of communication. We do have some solidarity within the GOP in Washington. This is the GOP leader from the House saying that we need to keep 18F and USDS around because that they're great opportunities to improve government operations, which is always a good thing. So, where we find an opportunity for solidarity, let's join together. Let's do it today, let's do it tomorrow, and let's do it forever. And with that, I'm going to introduce John Paul Farmer, who has stood in solidarity with us within BetaNYC and Civic Hall to really keep us and our activities going. So, John, thank you.
Thank you, Noel. Thanks for the intro. So I'm John Paul Farmer, if we haven't met before. I'm at Microsoft. My role there is I'm the Director of Technology and Civic Innovation. This came from an idea that the company had before I got there, which was to go deep into communities. And when we talk about the change that everyone in this room is making at the local level, that's why we're here. We're here to partner with organizations like BetaNYC, like Civic Hall, like Code for America, who are making change happen. Because at the end of the day, we all know that data and technology has tremendous potential, but it's up to us to make that potential into reality. So I've heard themes this evening that kept repeating themselves: collaboration, connectivity. There are two quotes that come to mind. One, the first is from Bill Joy. Bill was the co-founder of Sun Microsystems. And in a meeting one day, Bill said to everyone in the room, you know, no matter who you are, most of the smartest people work for somebody else. No matter who you are, most of the smartest people are somewhere else. It comes back to the importance of connectivity, the importance of collaboration beyond the walls of whatever organization we're in. That's where our strength is. It's in our ability to tap into one another to get the most done. That's why we believe in diverse teams. That's why we believe that it takes every sector of society to come together to tackle our hardest problems. And the second quote is one that's a lot more recent. It's from Alec Ross. Alec's been here. He's been on the stage. Alec was the innovation advisor to Hillary Clinton when she was the Secretary of State. And Alec said, and has written in his book, that the principal struggle of the 21st century might not be left versus right, but open versus closed. I think we're seeing that play out. And I think we all have a role to play in deciding what kind of society we want to live in. An open one or a closed one. One that can solve problems because it's collaborative and connected, or one that can't. Places like Civic Hall are so important, and they're going to be even more important going forward. So we're excited to be partners with Civic Hall. We appreciate the vision that Mika Sifri and Andrew Roche have had to create this. And I'd like to invite one of those visionaries, Andrew Roche, to the stage to close this out.
Hey, everybody. Thank you, John. Thank you, Noel. Usually at these kinds of events, you're supposed to acknowledge public officials. We acknowledged one, but I'd like to acknowledge another one who actually just left, unfortunately, the city of New York, but who was very instrumental in Civic Hall's success, Minerva Tentaco, who's still with us here today, former CTO of the city of New York. So it's a little bit bittersweet, but I have to say that I'm very excited, mostly because of the energy that I feel from all of you, and I thank you for that. Noel mentioned something about, us holding ourselves accountable, and I was also at Code for America Summit, and was excited to see the enthusiasm, the growth of that organization. Code for America Summit and Personal Democracy Forum are sort of like two sides of the same coin, trying to make the world a better place inside and outside of government. But I have to tell you that I was very worried and very upset at the Code for America Summit because we were 3 days in front of an election and there was literally no discussion about politics at Code for America. And there's a reason for us not to talk about politics generally at places like Code for America and Personal Democracy Forum because we are nonpartisan. We believe that technology, making the world a better place, is a nonpartisan issue. But we have a problem. Our problem is that we're not yet mature enough as a community to completely separate being nonpartisan from when we see racist, misogynistic, fascist, or bigoted speech normalized as part of our political process. I had the pleasure of sharing the stage with Stacey Donahue from Omidyar Network, which helped fund Civic Hall and also helped fund Code for America, and with Jen Palka and a few other speakers, and our topic was how to scale civic tech. And I couldn't help myself but to warn everybody that the biggest threat to the promise of civic tech is the election of Trump as president. It was the first time that people in the audience cheered the fact that somebody was speaking out against Donald Trump at a conference that's intended to support technology for the public good. That has to change. I'm not saying that we should openly become partisan. We should remain nonpartisan, but we have to be vigilant. We have to prevent the normalization of the kinds of threats that were made during the campaign to the point where we don't know the difference. And I want to just add just to give you an example of this. We have to have better definitions for GovTech and civic tech and urban tech. They overlap. There's amazing GovTech, there's amazing civic tech, and there's amazing urban tech. But knowing the difference is really, really important. And I'll give you an example. Some of you may have read my post about this. If a technology that helps the police department check the social media profiles and tweets of African Americans that they pull over on the side of the highway before they pull them over, is that GovTech or is that civic tech? If one of the sponsors of our conferences is helping the Department of Homeland Security create a database of undocumented people in the United States, should we take their sponsorship dollars? Are we strong enough as a community to recognize the difference and to say no? We have a lot of work to do. Not just supporting the idea of civic tech for the public good, but in helping our fellow citizens and our collaborators understand the principles and values of human decency and civil rights while we are supporting GovTech and civic tech. Lastly, I think it's amazing that we can start actually now, after so many years of working in this field, point to really good examples of where technology is making a difference. Measurable difference. CalFresh was mentioned earlier, a great project. Or innovations like Crisis Text Line, started by people who actually didn't really think of themselves as civic technologists and are actually creating technologies that supplant, completely change the way we think about how services are delivered. But all those innovations have a theory underneath them that somehow if we could make government work better, we can make our politics better. And there is a little bit of truth in that. If you can make this public trust government more, then maybe people will be more engaged, be less apathetic. Politics is messy, yes. But we need to innovate our democracy, too. It was designed in the agricultural age. To some degree, it's been subverted in the industrial age by things like money, capitalism run amok. And we have to figure out whether it's still relevant in the information age. And so we need more people working on better forms of engagement, not just to call your city councilman or your congressman or to get more people to vote, but to develop better systems for communities to be able to make decisions about the most important things that affect their lives. So platforms like Lumio, Democracy Earth, or experiments like Liquid Democracy that the Pirate Party has tried to implement are important examples, but we need more. We need to reconnect citizens. Let me say it to you this way. This country is not going to get fixed by fixing our political parties or by electing new leaders. It's going to get fixed by citizens talking to each other. Neighbor to neighbor, block by block, neighborhood to neighborhood. And not just talking to each other, but listening to each other. And we don't have the tools, the best tools yet built to facilitate those kinds of conversations. And we're not holding our technology companies accountable for things like fake news or algorithms that have biases built into them, and no one's even thought about the empathy of humanity when they're designing them. It's up to us to do that, not just cheer GovTech and civic tech, but to build new mechanisms for democracy in the 21st century. So we're closing Civic Hall here, but we're reopening just down the block. Civic Hall is not a place, it's a community. You're all part of it. So with that, I'd like to invite my dear partner, the real yin to my yang, Mika Sifri, to say a few words, if you could. Introduce Andrew Slack.
I don't really have anything prepared. So actually, because it's been a couple of weeks of true These have been hard weeks, yeah. It's like riding an earthquake, and we don't even know if the earthquake is over. So I don't want to take any more of your time other than to say we thought it would be fun to end. We managed to get someone who, he's usually busy in Washington running the country. He's got a few more months left, but he thought he would come up here through his spirit animal, Andrew Slack, and offer you a song to end the evening. So I give you our outgoing president, Barack Hussein Obama.
Oh boy. Look at you. Look at you. Look at this place. Isn't it neat? Wouldn't you think my collection's complete? Wouldn't you think I'm the guy? The guy who's got everything. I mean, look. Right? I've got gadgets and gadgets aplenty. I got who's its and what's it galore. If you're interested in thingamabobs, I've got 20. But when you look at the deeper issues, it is no big deal. Who cares? We want more. We want to be where the people are. We want to go. We want to see them dancing. Running around on those streets. Up where they walk. Up where they run. Up where they play all day under a non-threatening sun. Wandering free. We wish we could be part of that world. Let me ask you a question. What would we give if we could live out of these waters? What would we pay to spend a day warm on the sand? I'll bet you on land, they understand. And they don't reprimand their daughters or grab them in. Oh boy. What the fuck did I mean, like, I've been up here for 8 years working with patients and to work for a whole new world, a new fantastic point of view. And what do you end with, folks? It's like a joke that's not funny. It's like a horrible 8-year lead up to a punchline, and then the punchline is this orange-faced goon. But I'm going to complete because the reality is this: in a world where we have an internet, in a world where we have we the people, in a world where America is an unfinished symphony. It iterates. We will move and groove with humanity. The work we've laid forth in these last 8 years don't end on January 20th. They continue. Yes, we continue. Regardless of whatever walls we face, yes, we continue. We are fired up. We are fired up. So, Mr. Trump, I may have been polite to you, you fat asshole, but we are fired up. No, don't you remember? God damn it, it's ready to go. We are fired up. Fired up. On January 20th, we are fired up. From Civic Hall to Civic Gov to Civic whatever it is inside of your body. We are going to, yes, we continue. We are going to continue that dream. We are going to get out of those waters, and we are going to go to the place that I believe that we can go with the passion, ingenuity, and innovation that are the American people. The dreams of so many. We will reach those dreams, and we will be part of that world. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. There's still a little bit of beer left. Some wine and beer over here. Please stay, hang out, help us close up. And we will see you soon over on West 22nd. Good night.
Perfect.